Hello, Tom Maguire. Merry Christmas. I hope you're having a good one. I hope you've all managed to relax a little bit and just forget about things and chill out, hopefully. I know it's a weird time of year for some people. It's a horrible time of year. For a lot of people, it's a horrible time of year. There's loads of language and stuff in the news at the minute talking about us all having a bleak Christmas and how it's going to be a different Christmas and a terrible Christmas and things. And I do think that we need to be a little bit careful about kind of the language that we use when we're talking about things, particularly when we're talking about ourselves. Language can be really powerful, and if we kind of go into something like Christmas expecting it to be terrible, and the chances are it probably is going to be, I think we need to exercise, where possible, a little bit of perspective and kind of realise that actually, okay, just because we can't do exactly what we want to do like we might have done in years past doesn't mean it's going to be a bleak, terrible Christmas necessarily. Unfortunately, some people always have a bleak, terrible Christmas because some people have it really bad, and that's just life, sadly. Most of us, once we get to a certain age, have a certain amount of sadness associated with Christmas, so it's a funny time of year. I personally really like it. I always try and keep really positive around Christmas. I consider myself to be very fortunate. I always enjoy it. But yeah, it's just a funny one. I think we need to be careful about being sucked in by this kind of news of what's going on and saying how terrible it's going to be, when actually if you've got a roof over your head, if you're warm, you've got family nearby, you know, you can have a glass of something, you can have some good food. Is it necessarily that terrible? Okay, so I'm ranting on, but this is kind of relevant to this book. So, How to Make the World Add Up by Tim Harford. It's a really interesting book. It's very new. Came up in my Audible suggestions. The guy works, I think he's on Radio 4. He does a column in the Financial Times, which is a good newspaper. Out of all the newspapers, it's the one that I read the most, actually. I don't read any newspapers daily, but I do pick up the Financial Times from time to time. I think it just gives a good balance. I think it's well done. It doesn't seem to be as kind of biased as some, although I know there's bias in all newspapers. He's done another book called Messy, which was done in 2016, or came out in 2016. How to be creative and resilient in a tidy-minded world. So that's another one that could appeal to me, because I consider myself to be quite creative, but I'm not always the most organised necessarily. Organisation is something I have to work at quite hard. But this is just a really interesting book, actually. I kind of found maybe that it could have been a little bit shorter, a little bit more pacey perhaps. Towards the end I switched off a little bit. There were certain bits that didn't interest me quite so much, but most of it is really good, I would say. He talks about the book How to Lie with Statistics, written in 1954 by Darrell Huff, and this was the book on statistics at the time. He's basically debunking statistics and saying that statistics are a load of rubbish, and we've kind of got to this stage, and Tim Harford says this in one of his interviews on YouTube as well. We've kind of got to a stage where we really distrust statistics, and actually we almost have this negative attitude where we don't believe anything anymore. And he's basically kind of trying to say that yes, we should question things, we should be curious, we shouldn't just accept what's told to us, but we kind of need to have a little bit of faith in things, otherwise we might as well just kind of give up, really. If we don't believe anything that's ever said, and we just don't trust any politician, we don't trust anything that ever happens, we become a bit of a conspiracy theorist type, really, don't we? We risk becoming a bit kind of nuts and just not really trusting anything, and you know, we might as well just sort of like give up, really, and stop paying taxes and stop working, because everything's just going to go to hell, and what's the point? So he kind of argues you have to have a certain amount of trust and faith, and I get that as well. And I saw people having an argument the other day, and both sides thought they were 100% right. They weren't prepared to back down. They weren't really prepared to listen to the other person. You know, you both have a point, but you're both so adamant that you're right, and you're both so concerned with winning the argument rather than just kind of learning from each other. And maybe I'm a bit strange like that, but I find that really weird. When I have a conversation with someone, unless it's someone I'm really close to, like a family member, in which case it might get a bit kind of heated possibly, and it might come down to sort of winning sometimes if it's my sister or my brother or something, maybe my wife occasionally if it's an argument, what have you, that's a bit different. But generally, if I'm having a conversation with someone, it's not about winning, it's about trying to learn and trying to actually come out of the conversation better off than I went in before. And I'm quite happy to put my hands up and say, I didn't know that actually. Great, I'm glad I know that now, or, you know, what have you. I don't have to necessarily win the conversation. So I just think so many of us are so kind of like, that's a load of rubbish, particularly all this COVID-19 stuff. These statistics aren't correct, they're a load of rubbish, we can't trust them, blah, 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 blah. And yes, question stuff. Don't just believe what's told to you by the BBC or any other form of media. Don't just take it as absolute truth and fact. Question it, be curious, do your own research. And that's basically what he's trying to say. You know, back in the day when Darrell Huff wrote this book, he was taken on by the tobacco companies because he basically said that the link that had been come up with by scientists of smoking causing lung cancer was a load of rubbish. In fact, it was just the same as storks being related to the number of babies born, basically storks nesting on roofs, and so they took him on as an advocate for them. And so that was a bit of a stark warning, really, that actually, you can write off statistics, but when there's real scientific evidence there and actually it stands to kind of do you good, in other words, don't smoke because, that's going to cause you cancer, there is danger in just not believing it. And he's basically saying that, a lot of our attitude is, if I don't believe anything, then I can't possibly be fooled. It's almost this negative. It's kind of the same thing as never trying and never kind of, the biggest failure being the person who never tries in the first place. If I don't try, then I won't fail, I won't feel embarrassed. So if I don't believe anything, then I'll never be fooled, I'll never have the wool pulled over my eyes. We have to kind of be resilient and courageous enough to accept that occasionally we might be fooled a little bit, and actually that's how we learn, that's how we grow, and that's how we develop. So that does have to be a certain amount of trust, and kind of we do have to put our faith in things to a certain extent. It doesn't mean being walked on and being completely fooled all the time. But the big message in this book is to stay curious, and I think that's something that's really important. Curiosity, I think, is massive. If I'm not interested in something, then I will be rubbish at it. I will not learn because I just switch off. My wife says the same thing. She says, you're great at things that you're interested in. You'll read books and books on things that you're fascinated by, and you'll become an absolute expert at it. But anything you're not interested in, even if it's something that you should try and be interested in to further yourself, you're just hopeless. You just switch off, and that's completely true. I completely admit that. That's why I'm so passionate about books, because there are so many books out there. They absolutely fascinate me. I put my energy, my time into them, and that improves me. The stuff that I'm not interested in, I just won't do. It's as simple as that. He talks about Galileo. He couldn't get the cardinals at the time to look through his telescope at Jupiter's moons. He was trying to prove to them that Jupiter's moons did exist, and they were just basically, they were convinced it was some trick of dark magic. There was something going on in the telescopes, so they refused to look. And we laugh at that sort of story now, Tim Harford says, but actually it's really quite serious. We are behaving in the same way as those cardinals when we often just put our hands in front of our eyes and just refuse to accept that something might be the case because we don't want to be fooled. He says that doubt has a special kind of power. So, we're far more likely to doubt something than to kind of put our faith into something. So we're going to veer on the side of doubt quite often, which makes it easier for us to fall into that trap. I'm not going to give too many spoilers, but he talks about Vermeer and Van Meegeren, and how there was a piece of artwork that was fobbed off as real, and that's a really interesting story. It's worth reading for that. And he's kind of basically saying that sometimes we want to be fooled, sometimes we want to believe in something, and therefore that gives people opportunity to pull the wool over our eyes, because if it's something that we want to believe in, then that can happen quite easily. So he basically just says it's really important when we're presented with a piece of information, a statistic or something like that, particularly he says if it's from someone like Donald Trump, for example, or Greenpeace, for example, we need to just stop, take a breath, calm ourselves down and just think about it for a little while, because what those organisations want us to do is to react emotionally. And when you react emotionally, you give them what they want. Like, what you need to do is just take a breath, control your emotion, take a step back, think about it. Just think about it, get curious, do a bit of research, okay? Don't just don't just find this news and enraging or whatever. Have a think about it, okay? He talks about all sorts of interesting things, the statistics around teenage pregnancies and diabetes, and he puts a really good quote in there from Alan Moore, the guy who created Watchmen. And Alan Moore is someone who's worth looking up on his own, actually. He's really, really fascinating. He's responsible for a lot of superhero comics and things, bringing them over to Great Britain. And his Miracles of Humans quote is really, really good. Loads of really interesting stuff in this book, I think. I found that I did switch off a little bit in places, which is a bit of a shame because I didn't think that was going to happen. I was really looking forward to this one. But I'd say it's a 4-star. It's definitely really good. Really important. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about it really, but it's a good one. So I hope you're having a very Merry Christmas, and I hope you have a good New Year. Cheers.